Let me tell you about the day I became expensive. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and corporate desperation. 73 of us crammed into chairs that cost more than my first car, all summoned by an email with the subject line, Town Hall. Exciting updates. That's how you know you're screwed. When management uses the word, exciting, someone's about to lose their job. Samuel Knight stood at the front, his voice dripping with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for pyramid schemes and timeshare presentations. He'd been CEO for exactly 11 months, parachuted in from some Silicon Valley failure that somehow got spun as innovation experience. The board loved him, called him a disruptor. I called him what he was, a man who confused confidence with competence. We're embarking on a transformative journey, he announced, clicking to a slide that said, Strategic Realignment, in letters big enough to read from space. I was sitting in the back row, left side, third seat from the aisle. Close enough to hear everything. Far enough to see the faces of everyone who'd know what was coming before I did. My name is Isabella Rhodes. 42 years old. 17 years with Stratford Global Solutions, a defense contracting firm that made its money keeping government secrets and Pentagon budgets flowing. I wasn't a project manager or an executive assistant or whatever diminishing title they'd eventually try to stick on my tombstone. I was the Chief Regulatory Compliance Officer for all federal and defense-adjacent contracts. The person who made sure that when senators asked where their money went, we had answers that kept us out of prison. But Samuel didn't understand that. To him I was overhead. A line item in a budget spreadsheet that needed trimming. We've made some difficult but necessary decisions, he continued, and I felt my hands go cold. That phrase. That specific combination of words. I'd heard it before in other companies, other industries. It's what managers say when they're about to destroy lives and call it optimization. He clicked to the next slide. Names. 7 of them. Mine was third. Isabella Rhodes. He read aloud like he was calling attendance in middle school. We thank her for her years of dedication. However, as we streamline our operational framework and pivot toward a more agile infrastructure, we need to make space for fresh perspectives and dynamic talent. Fresh perspectives. Dynamic talent. Corporate poetry for, we're replacing you with someone cheaper who doesn't know what they don't know. I didn't stand up. Didn't gasp. Didn't cry. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, watching 72 other people avoid eye contact. A few looked sorry. Most looked relieved it wasn't them. Someone in the front row actually started clapping. Polite, scattered applause rippled through the room like a funeral reception where nobody liked the deceased. The HR director, a woman named Maya Keller with a smile like a corporate hostage video, approached me after the meeting with a folder and a branded stress ball. We've prepared a transition package, she said softly as if volume was the problem. Your access will be revoked at end of business today. We'll need your badge and laptop before you leave. I nodded. Took the folder. Didn't open it. Do you have any questions? She asked. No, I said. I walked out through the side exit, the one that led to the parking garage instead of the main lobby. Didn't want to parade past the office I'd occupied for 17 years like some fired contestant on a reality show. The elevator doors closed, sealing me into that small metal box, and that's when I pulled out my phone. 3-factor authentication. Biometric scan. 12-digit passphrase I'd memorized years ago. I logged into the Federal Compliance Management System, the digital fortress that housed every contract, every certification, every piece of regulatory documentation that kept Stratford legally allowed to exist. I navigated to Form 2247C. Responsible Officer Status Change. See, here's the thing nobody at Stratford seemed to understand, least of all Samuel Knight and his slideshow of corporate violence. I wasn't just some bureaucrat who filed paperwork and sent reminder emails. I was the named responsible officer for every single contract we held with the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, and 4 separate intelligence agencies. My name was on the compliance certifications. My signature was on the regulatory attestations. Legally, federally, irrevocably, I was the only person authorized to verify that Stratford Global Solutions wasn't lying, stealing, or accidentally selling classified information to hostile foreign governments. And when a named responsible officer's employment is terminated, federal regulations are very clear about what happens next. The officer must submit immediate notification to the oversight agencies. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Immediately. And until a replacement officer is named, vetted, cleared, and formally installed, all covered contracts enter what's called administrative hold status, which is government speak for everything stops and the penalties start. I clicked through the form fields. Reason for status change. Employment termination. Effective date. Today. Replacement officer assigned. None. A warning box appeared. Bright red text against white background. Warning. Submission will trigger immediate stop work orders on all contracts requiring active NRO oversight. Failure to assign replacement within 24 hours will result in automatic non-compliance designation and financial penalties as outlined in 48 CFR 9.405. I read it twice. Then I clicked submit. A confirmation number appeared. 8 digits. I screenshotted it, saved it to 3 different places and logged out. The elevator doors opened. I walked across the parking garage, got into my car and drove home. Didn't speed. Didn't cry. Didn't feel much of anything except a strange, cold clarity. I just set a timer on a bomb I'd spent 17 years building, and nobody at Stratford even knew it was ticking. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Maya had already emailed me the separation agreement. 16 pages of legal boilerplate and a severance offer of $42,000, contingent on signing a non-disparagement clause and a general release of claims. They wanted me to promise I wouldn't sue, wouldn't talk, wouldn't exist. I deleted the email, poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the news, waited. The first cracks appeared at 9:47 the next morning. I wasn't at Stratford, obviously. I was at home on my couch wearing pajama pants and a sweatshirt with a coffee stain on the sleeve. But I'd kept access to the company's Slack channels. Nobody had thought to revoke that yet. IT was slow. IT was always slow. The message came from someone named Colin Drake, a project lead on one of the Air Force contracts. Anyone else locked out of the secure project portal? 3 minutes later, another message. Getting an error on Athena system. Says compliance verification required. Then another. FedNet login is down. Compliance flag on the authentication screen. I watched the messages pile up. Confusion turning to concern, turning to panic. They were locked out. All of them. Every system, every portal, every database that touched federal money or classified data. And nobody knew why. Except me. At 10:15 someone tagged Maya in the Slack channel. Is this related to yesterday's transition? Was there a compliance handoff we missed? Maya didn't respond. She was probably in a meeting or on the phone, or staring at her computer screen trying to figure out why the entire digital infrastructure of a $700 million company had suddenly turned into a brick. By 11 they'd figured out enough to panic properly. The CTO, a man named Aidan Brooks who wore expensive sneakers and talked about blockchain at parties nobody invited him to, sent a company-wide email with the subject line urgent. System access issues. We are currently experiencing technical difficulties with several secure portals. IT is investigating. Please stand by for updates. Technical difficulties. I almost laughed. This wasn't a server glitch or a password reset gone wrong. This was federal compliance architecture doing exactly what it was designed to do when the keystone gets removed. It collapses. Completely. Automatically. Irreversibly. At 11:43 the first official notification arrived. Not to me. To Stratford. To Samuel Knight's inbox and the General Counsel's inbox and the board chair's inbox. A simple email with no logo, no signature, just black text on white background and a PDF attachment. Your organization is currently designated as non-compliant for all contracts involving federal and defense-related work under Titles 10, 32 and 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations. All associated work is hereby suspended pending resolution of named responsible officer vacancy. Penalties accrue at $100,000 per hour effective 5:47 p.m. yesterday. $100,000. Per hour. Not per day. Per hour. The PDF outlined the specific violations, the regulatory framework, the appeals process, there wasn't one, and the reinstatement requirements, there was exactly one, me. I didn't read the Stratford email myself, but I had friends, quite friends, the kind who forward things without asking questions, the kind who understand that sometimes loyalty to a person matters more than loyalty to a logo. The email landed in my personal inbox at noon. I read it 3 times slowly, savoring every bureaucratic sentence like fine wine. Then I opened my laptop and updated my LinkedIn profile. Current position: Independent Regulatory Compliance Consultant. Specializing in federal contract oversight, defense acquisition compliance, and NRO services for high-stakes regulated industries. I added one line to my summary: currently accepting select consulting engagements. Discretion assured. I didn't tag Stratford. Didn't mention them by name. Didn't need to. Within 2 hours my profile views had tripled. By end of day I had 6 messages from recruiters from former colleagues at other firms, and 2 from competitors who'd apparently heard whispers. One message stood out. From a VP at Halcyon Defense Systems, one of Stratford's biggest rivals. Heard about the transition. If you're exploring opportunities, we should talk. We value people who understand the landscape. I didn't respond. Not yet. Let them wonder. Meanwhile, back at Stratford, the wheels were coming off in real time. By Friday morning, the panic had metastasized into full corporate meltdown. I watched it unfold through a combination of Slack messages, forwarded emails, and one very stressed phone call from Monica Reeves. A former colleague in risk management who'd always been decent to me. She didn't want anything. Just wanted me to know that things were really bad. They're trying to override the system, she told me, voice low like she was hiding in a supply closet. Aiden tried to manually reinstate compliance status through some back-end admin panel. It didn't work. Just generated another flag in the oversight system. What kind of flag? I asked, though I already knew. Unauthorized attempt to circumvent NRO protocols. It's on record now. Some intern at the Department of Oversight is probably filling out paperwork as we speak. I thanked her and hung up. Pulled up my notes from years ago, back when I'd helped rewrite Stratford's entire compliance charter after a near-miss export control violation that almost cost us our license. I'd been thorough. Maybe too thorough. I'd built redundancies and safeguards and tripwires into every system, every process, every single point where the company interfaced with federal authority. And I'd made sure that all of it, every last piece, required my direct authorization to change. Because I'd learned something in 17 years of cleaning up other people's messes. If you're going to be responsible for keeping the lights on, you make damn sure nobody can flip the switch without you. At 2:30 that afternoon, the CFO sent an internal memo that leaked to me within 20 minutes. Subject line: Financial Impact Assessment. The body of the email was 3 paragraphs of corporate doublespeak, but the attachment was pure nightmare fuel. A spreadsheet. Color-coded. Read everywhere. Penalty accrual: $100,000 per hour, currently at 73 hours. Total: $7,300,000 and counting. Frozen contracts: 14 active projects, total value $620 million. Suspended payments: 9 invoices, total value $18 million. At-risk Q4 revenue: approximately $200 million. And at the bottom, in a separate highlighted box, estimated time to assign replacement NRO, unknown. Estimated time to obtain federal clearance for replacement, 90 to 120 days minimum. 3 to 4 months. They'd bleed out in 3 weeks. I saved the spreadsheet, printed it, taped it to my refrigerator next to a grocery list and a dentist appointment reminder. Every time I grabbed the milk, I'd see that number growing. 7 million. 8 million. 10 million. I slept better than I had in years. Monday morning the begging started. First it was Maya. An email from her personal account, not the company one. Subject: checking in. Isabella, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out personally to see how you're feeling after Thursday's transition. I know it was abrupt and I want you to know that we truly valued your contributions. If you have a moment, I'd love to chat. Maybe coffee. I archived it without responding. 2 hours later, Aiden. Also personal email. Also desperate. Isabella, we're experiencing some system access issues that might be related to compliance protocols you managed. Would you be available for a quick call to help us troubleshoot? Happy to compensate you for your time as a consultant. Troubleshoot. Like this was a software bug and not a federal regulatory framework doing exactly what it was supposed to do. I didn't respond to that one either. By Wednesday the subtlety was gone. The general counsel himself, A man named Peter Grayson, who'd always treated me like I was part of the furniture, sent a formal letter via email and certified mail. Dear Ms. Rhodes, Stratford Global Solutions requests your immediate assistance in resolving urgent regulatory matters stemming from the recent transition of the named responsible officer role. We are prepared to offer a consulting arrangement at triple your previous compensation for a period of 60 days to facilitate system restoration and compliance reinstatement. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Triple compensation. 60 days. Consulting arrangement. They wanted me to fix what they broke, then disappear again. I drafted a response. Took my time. Made sure every word was chosen with the precision of a surgeon selecting which artery to cut. Dear Mr. Grayson, I acknowledge receipt of your proposal. However, I must note that my willingness to engage in any consulting arrangement would require a comprehensive review of terms, full transparency regarding the circumstances of my departure, and assurances that any agreement would be structured in a manner consistent with my professional standards and personal dignity. I will have my attorney contact you to discuss preliminary terms. Best regards, Isabella Rhodes. Translation: I'm not doing a damn thing until you grovel properly, and even then maybe not. I didn't have an attorney. Not yet. But I'd get one. A good one. The kind who'd make them pay for every hour they'd wasted trying to lowball me. Peter responded within 30 minutes. We're prepared to discuss all terms. Please provide your attorney's contact information. I smiled. Called a lawyer I'd worked with years ago on a contract dispute. Explained the situation. He laughed so hard I thought he'd choke. Isabella, he said, still chuckling, they're screwed. You know that, right? Royally, completely, federally screwed. Don't settle for triple. Don't settle for 5 times. You're the only solution to a problem that's costing them $100,000 an hour. Make them feel it. Thanked him. Hung up. Stared at my laptop screen for a long time. The truth was, I didn't want money. I did. I'm not a martyr. But more than money, I wanted something else. Something that couldn't be bought or negotiated or wrapped up in a consulting contract with an NDA stapled to the back. I wanted Samuel Knight gone. Thursday afternoon, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, obviously. But I had sources. Always had sources. People who owed me favors. People who'd seen me save their projects from compliance disasters and remembered what loyalty looked like. The meeting was closed door. No recordings. No minutes. Just 8 board members, Samuel, Peter, and Aidan, sitting in a room that probably cost more per hour than most people make in a month. According to my source, someone who shall remain nameless and completely protected, the meeting started with Samuel trying to blame everyone else. Middle management. Sir. Anyone but himself. This is a process failure, he said, pointing at a slide titled Root Cause Analysis. We should have had redundancies in place. The compliance team should have flagged this risk during succession planning. The board chair, an older woman named Piper Donovan who'd been with Stratford since before I was born, cut him off mid-sentence. Samuel, she said, voice sharp enough to draw blood, we didn't have succession planning because you fired the only person who knew how the system worked. In front of 70 people. Without consulting legal, without consulting compliance, without apparently consulting your own common sense. Silence. How much has this cost us? Piper asked. Peter pulled up the spreadsheet. Current penalties, $11,200,000. Projected losses if unresolved within 30 days, $400 million. And how do we fix it? Piper asked. Peter hesitated. We need Isabella Rhodes to voluntarily reinstate her NRO status and sign over the designation to a qualified replacement. Can we force her? No. Federal regulations require voluntary participation. If we attempt coercion or if she formally declares herself unwilling, the system locks for 6 months. No appeals. No workarounds. Piper turned to Samuel. So you fired the one person we legally cannot function without, and now we're hostage to whether or not she feels like helping us. Samuel started to respond, but Piper held up a hand. I've heard enough. Samuel, you're suspended effective immediately pending a full board review. Peter, draft whatever offer it takes to get Isabella Rhodes back in this building. I don't care if we have to mortgage the company jet. Fix this. My source sent me that summary in a text message at 7 p.m. I read it twice. poured myself a bourbon, sat on my back porch and watched the sun set over the hills behind my house. Samuel Knight suspended. Not fired yet. But suspended. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Friday morning I got the call. Not from Peter. Not from Maya. From Piper herself. "Ms. Rhodes," she said, no preamble, no small talk. "I owe you an apology. What happened last week was unconscionable. Samuel acted without board approval, without proper process, and without understanding the consequences. We'd like to make this right." "Make it right how?" I asked. "Name your terms." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "I'll send you a proposal by end of day. But Piper, let me be clear. I'm not interested in coming back as an employee. I'm not interested in a consulting gig. If you want me to fix this, it's going to cost you more than money." "I understand," she said. "Send the proposal." I hung up, opened a blank document, started typing. The proposal was 2 pages. Short, precise, no ambiguity. Terms for reinstatement of named responsible officer status. 1. Immediate payment of $12,500,000 to Isabella Rhodes, wired within 48 hours of agreement execution. This is not a salary. This is not a consulting fee. This is compensation for 17 years of institutional knowledge, risk management, and crisis prevention that you just tried to throw away. 2. Full restoration of all benefits, including health insurance, retirement contributions, and stock options, backdated to the date of termination. All equity that would have vested during my tenure will vest immediately. 3. Samuel Knight resigns as CEO effective immediately, with no severance package beyond what his contract legally requires. His departure is announced publicly, with the board citing strategic differences. No spin. No golden parachute. Just gone. 4. I will serve as an external compliance advisor for a period of 90 days to facilitate NRO transition to a qualified replacement. During this time I work remotely. I set my own hours. I answer to Piper and the board, not to management. 5. A formal public acknowledgement in writing that my termination was made in error and that the company recognizes my contributions to its success. Failure to accept these terms within 72 hours will result in my formal written declaration of unwillingness to return, which will lock NRO reinstatement for 6 months per federal regulations under 48 CFR 9.405-2. During that time your penalty clock keeps running. Your contracts stay frozen. Your competitors smell blood in the water. And I sleep just fine. I attached the document to an email. Sent it to Piper, Peter, and every member of the board. CC'd my attorney. Then I went for a walk. Long one. Down to the park near my house where there's a pond and some ducks and usually nobody else this time of year. I sat on a bench and watched the water and thought about the last 17 years. The late nights. The emergency calls at 2 a.m. because some contractor had screwed up an export license. The audits I'd prepped for. The senators I'd briefed. The crises I'd defused before they became headlines. I'd given Stratford everything. And they'd thanked me with a cardboard box and applause. Now they'd pay. Not just in money. In pride. In power. In the public humiliation of watching their golden boy CEO walk out the door because one woman they'd underestimated had been holding the keys to the kingdom the whole time. The response came Saturday morning. Earlier than I expected. From Piper. Just 3 words. "We accept. Call me." I called. "The board voted unanimously," she said. "All 5 terms. Samuel is being informed this afternoon. The wire transfer will process Monday morning. Can you come in Tuesday to begin the transition process?" "Wednesday," I said. "I have plans Tuesday." I didn't have plans. I just wanted them to wait one more day. "Wednesday works," Piper said. "Isabella, for what it's worth, this should never have happened. You were right. About all of it." "Yes," I said. "I was." I hung up. Sat very still for a moment. Then I called my attorney and told him to watch for the wire transfer. $12,500,000. More money than I'd made in my entire career. More money than I'd ever imagined having. But honestly, the money wasn't the best part. The best part was the text message I got Sunday evening. From Monica Reeves. "Samuel just cleaned out his office. Security walked him out. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Thought you'd want to know." I did want to know. I wanted to know very much. I went back to that park. Same bench. Watched the ducks. Thought about power and systems, and the difference between being important and being irreplaceable. For 17 years I'd been the firewall between Stratford and disaster. I'd been invisible. Underestimated. Taken for granted. They'd thought I was just a bureaucrat shuffling papers and sending reminders. But I wasn't. I was the load-bearing wall. And when they knocked me down, the whole structure came down with me. Wednesday morning I walked into Stratford's headquarters at exactly 9 a.m. Didn't go through the main entrance. Went through the executive lobby, the one with the marble floors and the abstract art that cost more than most people's houses. Piper met me personally. Shook my hand. Thanked me. Walked me to a conference room where Peter and 2 other board members were waiting with a stack of documents. The wire transfer confirmation. Printed. Highlighted. $12,500,000. Deposited into my account at 8:47 that morning. The benefits restoration agreement. Signed by the board chair, the CFO and the head of HR. The public statement already drafted, ready for release. Stratford Global Solutions announces the departure of CEO Samuel Knight, effective immediately. The board thanks him for his service and looks forward to a new chapter of leadership. Additionally, the company acknowledges that the recent transition of Isabella Rhodes from her role as Chief Regulatory Compliance Officer was made in error. Ms. Rhodes's contributions to Stratford's success over 17 years have been invaluable, and we are grateful for her continued partnership as we move forward. I read it twice. Then I signed the reinstatement forms. All of them. Neat, careful signatures. My silver pen, the one I'd bought after my first major compliance victory back in 2009. How long will the transition take? Peter asked. 90 days, I said. Maybe less if your replacement is competent. Maybe more if they're not. Do you have someone in mind? I smiled. I have a list. I'll send it over by Friday. I didn't tell them that the list had exactly one name on it. Monica Reeves. The only person at Stratford who'd treated me like a human being instead of a resource. The only person who'd earned the right to sit in the chair I'd built. The rest of Wednesday was paperwork. Forms. Authorizations. Reactivating my credentials. Sending notifications to every federal oversight agency that the NRO vacancy had been filled and compliance status was being restored. By Thursday morning, the systems were back online. The contracts were unfrozen. The penalty clock stopped at $14,700,000, which Stratford would pay to the federal government in installments over the next 2 years. Expensive lesson. But not as expensive as it could have been. I worked from home for the next 87 days. Trained Monica. Walked her through every system, every protocol, every tripwire and safeguard I'd built into the compliance infrastructure. She was sharp. Asked good questions. Didn't assume she knew things she didn't. On day 88 she passed her federal clearance review. On day 89 I signed the final transfer documents. On day 90 I sent Piper an email with 2 words. We're done. She called me an hour later. Thanked me again. Asked if I'd consider staying on as a permanent advisor. No, I said. But I'll answer Monica's calls if she needs help. He's good. Trust her. I will, Piper said. And Isabella? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I know, I said. And I hung up. That was 6 months ago. I'm still a consultant. Independent. Selective. I work with 3 other firms now, all competitors of Stratford. I charge what I'm worth, which turns out to be quite a lot. I work from home, set my own hours, and never attend a single meeting I don't want to attend. Samuel Knight. Last I heard he took a job at some startup in Austin. Smaller company. Smaller title. No stock options. No golden parachute. Just a regular salary and the knowledge that he'd torched a $700 million empire because he didn't understand the difference between overhead and infrastructure. I don't think about him much. But sometimes late at night I pull up that spreadsheet. The one showing the penalty accrual. $14,700,000. The most expensive PowerPoint slide in corporate history. And I smile. Because here's what I learned. You can fire someone. You can humiliate them. You can try to erase them with paperwork and branded stress balls and polite applause. But if that person is the keystone, if they're the one holding the whole structure together, If they're the only thing standing between you and a federal regulatory apocalypse, you better hope they're feeling generous when the walls start to fall. I wasn't feeling generous. And they fell beautifully. The thing nobody tells you about revenge, real revenge, the kind that's legal and justified and absolutely devastating, is that it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't gloat. It just sits there, ticking like a bomb you forgot you planted until one day it goes off and the whole building comes down. I didn't sabotage anything. Didn't delete files or corrupt data or send angry emails to clients. I didn't have to. I just let the system work exactly the way it was designed to work. The way I designed it to work. Because 17 years ago when I first took the compliance role, Stratford was a mess. Contracts everywhere. No centralization. No oversight. People signing off on federal projects who'd never even read the regulations. It was a disaster waiting to explode. So I fixed it. I built a framework. I centralized everything. I made sure that every contract, every certification, every single piece of federal paperwork flowed through one office. My office. And I made sure that the regulations, the real federal regulations with teeth and enforcement mechanisms, required one person to be responsible for all of it. Me. I wasn't trying to make myself unfireable. I was trying to keep the company from accidentally committing treason or money laundering or any of the other creative ways defense contractors can screw up when nobody's paying attention. But in the process, I'd made myself the only person who could legally authorize the work they did. And when they fired me without understanding that, they'd effectively fired themselves. The schadenfreude was delicious. But the real satisfaction came later, in the weeks and months after I'd left, when I started hearing stories from former colleagues about what it was like inside Stratford during those 90 days. Monica told me most of it. The rest came from LinkedIn messages and forwarded emails and one very drunk phone call from Aiden, who apparently felt guilty about not pushing back harder when Samuel suggested the layoffs. It was chaos, Monica said over coffee one afternoon, about 4 months after I'd officially transitioned out. Complete chaos. Nobody knew what to do. Half the company thought it was an IT problem. The other half thought it was a government shutdown or something. And Samuel just kept insisting it would blow over. Blow over, I repeated. Yeah. Like it was a bad quarter or a PR hiccup. He genuinely didn't understand what you did. None of them did. They thought compliance was just filing reports and attending meetings. She stirred her coffee, staring into the mug like it held answers. The worst part was watching them try to fix it without you. They brought in consultants. Expensive ones. 3 different firms. Paid them millions of dollars to figure out what was wrong. And every single one of them came back with the same answer. You need Isabella Rhodes. There's no workaround. There's no shortcut. She built this system, she's the only one who knows how it works, and more importantly, she's the only one the federal government recognizes as authorized to operate it. I sipped my tea. Must have been frustrating for them. Monica laughed. Frustrating doesn't cover it. Samuel tried everything. He even contacted some former Pentagon official he knew, tried to pull strings to get the regulations waived or bent or something. The guy apparently told him, and I'm quoting here, "The regulations don't care about your quarterly earnings. Fix your internal problems or lose your contracts." Good advice, I said. He didn't take it well. Started yelling at people. Blamed Peter for not catching the issue in legal review. Blamed Maya for processing the termination too fast. Blamed you for being, and again I quote, unnecessarily difficult. Difficult, I said. Piper shut him down pretty fast after that. Told him he'd created the problem and he'd better start working on solutions instead of scapegoats. That's when they reached out to you the first time. The consulting offer, I said. Right. Triple salary for 60 days. They actually thought you'd take it. Aiden said Samuel was confident you'd come back because, quote, people like her need the validation of being needed. I raised an eyebrow. People like me. Women. He meant women. Specifically, women over 40 who he assumed were desperate to stay relevant. I set down my tea. Carefully. Did he actually say that? Piper was in the room. She fired him on the spot. Well, suspended him. But same effect. The board voted him out 2 days later. Good. That detail hadn't made it into the official story. Piper had been diplomatic in her public statements, talking about strategic differences and new directions. But knowing that Samuel had been stupid enough to show his whole ass in front of the board chair made the victory even sweeter. What happened after that? I asked. Panic, Monica said. Pure panic. They realized they'd burned the only bridge that mattered and now they were stuck. Peter drafted like 6 different proposals trying to figure out what you'd accept. The board was terrified you'd just walk away and let them collapse. I considered it, I admitted. I know. That's what scared them. They couldn't threaten you, couldn't bribe you, couldn't manipulate you. You had all the power and they'd spent 17 years teaching you exactly how little they valued you. Not a great negotiating position. She smiled. For what it's worth, watching Samuel clean out his office was one of the best moments of my career. He looked so confused. Like he couldn't understand how this had happened to him. Consequences are confusing when you've never experienced them before, I said. Monica laughed again then got serious. Isabella, I need to ask you something. And you can tell me to shut up if it's none of my business. Go ahead. Why didn't you just let them burn? You could have. You could have walked away, let the contracts collapse, let the company implode. Why did you come back at all? I thought about that. It was a good question. Honest question. Because, I said slowly, letting them burn would have hurt a lot of people who didn't deserve it. The engineers. The project managers. The people who'd worked with me for years and never treated me like I was disposable. The Stratford had collapsed completely, hundreds of people would have lost their jobs. Good people. People I cared about. So you came back for them. I came back on my terms, I corrected. I made sure Samuel paid the price for his incompetence. I made sure the board understood exactly what they'd done. And I made sure I got compensated properly, not just for the work I'd done, but for the work I'd prevented them from having to do. But yeah, at the end of the day I came back because some things are bigger than revenge. Monica nodded. Well, for what it's worth, everyone knows what you did. The real story, not the official one. And everyone knows Samuel tried to destroy you and ended up destroying himself instead. Good, I said. Let them know. Let every other CEO and board member and executive in this industry know that you can't just throw away the people who keep your company functional. Eventually, the bill comes due. We finished our coffee. Talked about other things. Her transition into the NRO role. The new CEO, a woman named Catherine Lang who'd actually read the compliance charter before accepting the position. The projects that were back online. The contracts that had been renewed. Stratford survived. Diminished, damaged, but alive. They'd lost about 30% of their market value during the crisis. Several major contracts had gone to competitors. Their reputation in the industry had taken a hit that would take years to repair. But they survived. And I was free. Free from the late nights and the emergency calls and the constant pressure of being the only thing standing between a corporation and its own stupidity. Free from the politics and the meetings and the performance reviews where my communication style was always too direct and my team participation was always insufficient, even though I'd saved more projects than the entire executive team combined. Free to work when I wanted, where I wanted, for clients who actually valued what I brought to the table. The consulting work was better than I expected. Turned out there was a huge market for someone who actually understood federal compliance and wasn't afraid to tell companies when they were screwing up. I worked with defense contractors, aerospace firms, technology companies trying to break into government work. I charged what I was worth, which was a lot, and I never, ever accepted a job that required me to be in an office 5 days a week or attend a team-building retreat or pretend to care about corporate culture. I bought a house. Bigger than I needed, but I'd earned it. View of the mountains. Home office with proper lighting and a door that locked. Garden in the back where I grew tomatoes and herbs and absolutely nothing that required a compliance certification. Sometimes late at night I'd get messages on LinkedIn. From other women in similar positions. Mid-level managers with decades of experience, holding together critical systems nobody else understood, watching younger, less qualified men get promoted over them. They'd ask how I'd done it. How I'd stood up to the company. How I'd won. And I'd tell them the truth. I didn't win because I was brave or clever or because I'd planned some elaborate revenge. I won because I'd spent 17 years doing my job so well that the company literally couldn't function without me, and they were too stupid to realize it until I was gone. I'd tell them to document everything. To make themselves invaluable. To understand the systems they worked with so deeply that nobody else could replicate what they did. Not out of spite but out of professionalism. Because the better you are at your job, the more power you have when someone tries to take it away from you. Some of them listened. Some didn't. But the ones who did, the ones who really understood what I was saying, they'd message me months later with their own stories. Not always as dramatic as mine. But victories nonetheless. Severance packages that actually reflected their value. Promotions they'd been denied for years. Consulting contracts that paid what they deserved. Small rebellions. Quiet wins. The kind that don't make headlines but change lives. And every single one made me smile. Because here's the thing about power. It's not about being loud or aggressive or demanding. It's about knowing your value. Understanding your leverage. And being willing to walk away if they won't treat you right. I'd spent 17 years being the person who fixed problems. Who stayed late. Who took the hard calls and the difficult clients and the impossible deadlines. Who made sure the company didn't accidentally commit federal crimes. And when they fired me, they learned a valuable lesson. The quiet ones, the ones who never complain and never make a fuss, those are the ones you should fear the most. Because we're not quiet because we're weak. We're quiet because we're listening. Building. And when you finally push us too far, when you humiliate us in front of 70 people and hand us a cardboard box and expect us to disappear quietly, we don't scream or cry or beg. We just press a button. And watch you fall.